This is a video of the three basic stances or leg positionings in the Wu style Taijiquan. In all of these, there are some sort of basic principles that just hold throughout. The main one is what I like to call the Marionette Principle. So if you think about a marionette puppet, there are strings holding certain parts of the puppet, and that holds those parts up, and then all of the rest of the puppet hangs from those points. In our movements in the Wu style, there's a very similar principle. Certain points on the body will be held up. So for example, with my arm, when I raise my arm, the wrist is held up, but the elbow is not held up, right? However, if I raise my elbow, the elbow is held up, but the wrist is not. And so the other parts of the body kind of hang from the points that are held up. In the standing postures, the main point that's being held up is the crown of the head. So the whole body is kind of hanging from the crown of the head. The three postures that I'm going to talk about are the Wuji Posture, or empty stance, the Gongbu Posture, or archer stance, and the Mabu Posture, or horse stance, horse riding stance sometimes. To start with, I'll talk about the Wuji Posture, which is sort of the basic, just upright stance. Again, the spine is or the crown of the head is suspended like your marionette, and from there the rest of the body hangs down. The effects of this are the spine should feel like it's hanging down from the head, and your arms and shoulders are also hanging down. This causes your shoulders. Most people walk with their shoulders slightly tight, and if you let the shoulder actually hang from sort of your structure, it'll come forward slightly and down a little. It'll roll down, and you can feel it kind of settle into the socket of that joint. And what this causes is kind of a hollow chest. As your shoulders come forward, you'll feel that the chest is slightly hollowed or concave. The spine will then continue hanging down, and at the tailbone, this will cause the tailbone to feel as though it's tucking under the rest of your body. This is the same feeling you have when you sit down. If there were a stool here and I were to sit down on the stool, the tailbone will tuck down onto the stool when you sit. It's the sort of natural sitting posture. So it should feel like you're almost sitting onto the tops of the legs, onto the sort of top of your femur. Your hips should be sitting down onto that. And then the final element of this stance is the foot positioning. This foot positioning will remain the same through the other postures as well, with a few minor exceptions. But that is, the centers of the feet should line up underneath the centers of the armpit. That sort of shoulder width stance. This will be maintained even if you are stepping forward, moving forward, the feet will still maintain the same width. In the final stance, though, Mabu horse posture, the horse stance, that width will be adjusted, but I'll explain how that is adjusted later when I get to that. But so your feet are shoulder width apart. You feel like you're sitting, your tailbone is tucked, you're sitting on top of the legs. Your spine is hanging down from your head, and your shoulders are hanging to the front. This is called the Wuji Posture, or empty stance. And this is the basic upright stance in the Wu style. At this point, I'm standing on both feet. However, the empty stance can also be done on one foot. And when we do it on one foot, we're just going to keep everything from the hips up exactly the same. So all of the same principles, and just as if the hips were a tray, just slide it over. So when you're sliding over, be careful not to tip. So many people, when they move onto one hip, they let that hip push, or they let that leg push that hip up and kind of tilt their hips to try to stand on one foot. Don't do that. So the hips should remain at the same height, parallel to the floor. And then your center line will now be kind of at the inside, sort of lined up with your big toe, or the inside of your weighted foot, the foot with your weight in it. And this allows you to be basically standing in the same posture, but on one leg, and now you have free movement of that leg, of the empty leg. What this allows you to do is step. So now if I want to, I can step to the front, I can step to the side, I can step to the back. The stepping should not be thought of with any weight. So often when people step, they think putting weight into that foot, and they step like that. This idea of stepping should actually just be extending the foot and letting it fall down weightless to the floor, wherever it falls. So the reason I'm able to stick this foot in front of me is because this leg is bent. So I am lowered down. So if I lower down further, I can extend my foot further. If I stand up, it will come back. If I stand perfectly upright, it'll be just in the same upright posture. The same goes for going backwards, right? So I can be in this empty stance. I can place the foot backwards. If I want to place it further backwards, I can lower and place it further backwards. So that's the empty posture, Wuji posture. The second posture is called the gongbu, or archer or bow stance. In English, sometimes it's called archer stance, sometimes bow stance. This is the stance with one foot in front of the other, right? So when I have one foot in front of the other foot. And what this looks like is a triangle. So I'm creating a triangle. And this is a good support structure that allows me to transfer energy into the ground. The way to achieve this is to do the empty posture into one leg, and then just place the other foot in front. Now what we're going to do is shift the weight onto the front foot. And to do that, we're just going to push from the back foot and try to slide the hips forward. The same way we slid the hips sideways, we're now going to slide them forward. And they will slide forward and at an angle, because my foot is not, I'm not lining both of my feet up one in front of the other. So I can't move directly forward, right? So what from the side will look just like a forward motion, from the front will look like a sideways motion and diagonal motion. So in the finished posture of this gongbu, your weight should have shifted completely to the front foot. So right now my weight is completely on the right foot, and when I push forward, I'm going to shift my weight completely to the front foot so that the back leg is empty. And the center line will line up the same way, except now with the other toe. There are some sort of guidelines for where different parts of the body are that will help you align this structure correctly. Most of them are about how far forward you move things. That crown point we mentioned earlier, because we're moving into a triangle, and that line that's vertical now will be moving to diagonal. So the crown point, instead of being suspended by the sky, will now be suspended at an angle. Imagine gravity is going at a diagonal angle. You still can imagine that suspension, but it's now pulling, gravity is pulling into your rear heel, and this is pulling off at a diagonal. And you want to create a straight line from your back heel, through your hips, through your shoulders, and to that crown point. And that will be a diagonal line. You're also going to create a vertical line. The vertical line will be created by the front heel and ankle, the front knee, and the shoulders. So your shoulders should be over your front knee, which should be over your front ankle. And this is what allows, by leaning this far forward, this is what allows you to be weighted into the front foot. And the back foot is just there as a support. This is what's called the pillar and the post. The pillar takes the weight, the post supports it from being swayed in any way. So you can do this on the other side as well, right? So now I'm on, my weight is on my right foot. I have my vertical line, I have my diagonal line, and if I want to, I can lift my rear foot. The other way to get in this is same thing from the empty stance, but instead of stepping forward, I can just keep all my weight on the front and touch my foot to the back and just create that diagonal line now. All right, so I'll stand over here. So if I get onto my right leg, I can just, as I place my heel back, I'll have to bring my shoulders down slightly, and I'll create this vertical line, and I'll create my diagonal line as well, right? So those are the first two stances, the Wuji stance and the Gongbu stance. The last stance is slightly different. The footwork is a little different, and it's called Mabu, or horse riding stance, or sometimes just horse stance. And in this posture, we will change the width of the feet. However, if you look at it from a different angle, we won't be changing the width of the feet. So if I have my front leg, the one that I have my weight in, I'm in the Wuji posture on one leg. Instead of stepping back on those two parallel train tracks, now I'm going to imagine that there's a train track that's running through my heel this way, perpendicular to the way I'm facing. And I'm going to place my empty toe on that train track, anywhere along it. So if I want to do it really wide, I can place it very far over. If I want to do it nearby, I can place it nearby. But I'm going to have train tracks that are running this way now. So if you look at it from the side, I will still have my train tracks, but they're coming towards the camera now, even though I'm facing to the side. So I can place my foot over, and what this allows, this is actually just that archer stance. If I rotate this foot towards the camera and this foot towards the camera, I'm now in my archer stance, right? This is now my archer stance. It's the correct width for my feet. So I'm lining up those train tracks, but perpendicular, so that if I turn sideways, I would be on them. But now I'm facing to the side of the train tracks. What I'm going to do is put my weight in my front foot, Wuji posture, place the foot to the side, right? And now, keeping this leg empty, I'm going to release the toe so that only the heel is touching the ground. And I'm going to turn my hips to the left. So I'm going to turn my hips towards the empty foot, and I'm going to let the empty toe follow so that it's pointing as if I had two like headlamps on my hips pointing forward. If I turn my hips, those headlamps turn. Even if I stay in place, if I turn my hips, those headlamps turn. I'm going to let the toe follow the hips. So as I turn my hips, the toe will follow. And I'm going to turn my hips to 45 degrees. And now I'm going to start pushing my hips, the weight of my hips, so slide the hips, same way we did before, over into this leg. So now I have half of my weight pressed into this foot. The knee and the toe and the hip are all pointed 45 degrees to the diagonal. this foot and this knee are both pointed straight forward. And so I've kind of opened this is called the qua, or the crotch. I've opened my qua, I've opened my crotch. And now my hips and torso are pointed 45 degrees, and I have my weight split between the two legs. And so this seems like it's a different posture. Like I said before, if I just adjust my footwork, then it will appear to be the archer stance I was in before. If I bring this foot in and bring this foot out, I'm now just in that archer stance I was in before. So there's a correlation between those two, but they're slightly different. I think that's everything. That is the Wuji posture, the archer stance, and the horse stance from the Wu style Taijiquan.